Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be rigging this male base mesh character with advanced skeleton. And I know I have a few earlier videos on the channel going over my process rigging with advanced skeleton, but well, one, I've updated this base mesh topology wise and it needs to be re-rigged. But also there's been a bunch of advanced skeleton updates, a lot recently, and I'd like to go over all the new features. And the process of rigging itself has changed a little bit. So we're going to be going through the body rig, the body setup today, and then I'll do a separate video for the face setup. So this scene is just my model. So the way I like to set up everything before I rig is just bring in everything into a scene, have my model totally set up, make sure that it renders correctly and everything. And then I clean up this scene and start my rig. So let's load up advanced skeleton and dock it to the side first. Units currently sent to millimeter. Advanced skeleton requires centimeter. Okay to switch. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And before we start, make sure that you're on the latest version. So the version that I'm using right now is 5.779, and we'll check for updates, and there's no updates found. Alright, so make sure that everything is set up correctly in this model scene, and then I'm going to Control S, save this out as a separate file under rig files, and then I'll just save this out as male 05 rig. Really important to save out iteratively, so if you make mistakes, you can go back and fix the rig, or go back to an earlier state of the rig and fix whatever needed to be fixed before you got to a part where you couldn't go back necessarily. Alright, so this pre-section here, I usually just do manually because when you clean your model, it will get rid of your shaders and it might break some of your XGen connections. So for me, I'd rather just have everything set up the way I want. It's fine. I mean, if your character's, it's a simple setup and it's easy to attach whatever textures you want. Go ahead, do this cleaning section. But for me, I have everything set up the way I want, so I'm gonna clean manually, and I'll show you how I do that. So the first thing that I do is I delete everything in my scene that's not necessary. So usually what you do is, for this model clean section, group all your models so that you have one top node and name this group Geo. So I do this, everything in here is related to my male body, and this other stuff was just stuff that I was using that helped me build it. So I just don't need any of this. And this render camera I don't need. So I'm just going to have everything grouped in this one group Geo. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and open this up, select everything, and I'm going to modify freeze transforms, modify reset transforms. So that should mean whatever I select, any of this, the move tool or the transpose tool will be dead center on the grid. Alright, and let me just, you want to check your channel box as well, make sure that everything's zeroed out, scales out 1. Alright, that all looks good. Oops. Oh, it looks like my left eye popped over to my right. So when I'm building the eyes, I usually build it on the right and then do duplicate special and scale it -1 on the X. For whatever reason, it popped back over, so let's see if we can fix that real quick. Pro tip, modify, freeze transform, reset transforms. Alright, so that looks good. Everything is zeroed out and on the 1, and no negative values here, which is good. Alright, let's turn off my hair to make it look a little bit easier. And then I'm going to say edit, delete all by type, history. And make sure you do this step before you start your rig, because if you delete your history with the rig, it will break your skinning. There is a way to delete history, say non-deformer history, and it'll delete all the history besides, deformer history, which would include, whatever skinning joints you have set up. All right, and then the other thing that I do is optimize scene size. So this just deletes all the garbage, the behind the scenes, the undo queue, the extra nodes that you just don't need. So let's save this. All right. So that takes care of roughly like the model clean section. And now we're going to do the symmetry. So I'm not sure if this guy is 100% symmetrical, but and if you look at my old video about how to clean or how to make sure your model's symmetrical, I would delete half of it and duplicate it over and merge them together along the axis and make sure that axis was perfect along the line, the grid line. But this updated method that I use, I'm not sure if this has always been available. This tool has always been available in Maya, but it is now. So it's definitely a lot faster and easier. You don't have to worry about copying over UVs or anything. So I'm just going into my front view. I'm selecting as best I can all of the faces on one side of the model. Well, looks like I maybe got it all. Let's go back to perspective and just double, triple check. Really important to have a clean center line, guys. I'm sure I've mentioned that in plenty of other videos, but if you're modeling symmetrically, it really does help. So what we're doing with, I think it's under Edit Mesh, Symmetrize, everything that we have selected on this side, it's going to, make sure that the vertices are mirrored on the other side. And this only works if your model is somewhat symmetrical and you have, an even number of quads, edge, and vertices on both sides. It's like if you use ZBrush, it's like Smart Resim. So let's go into Edit Mesh, Symmetrize, and then all you have to do is select any one of these edges on your center line. And the mesh should now be symmetrical. All right, so that takes care of this first two steps. And then the creating the rig file and referencing your model, I usually skip this step because I just save off iteratively. I already have my model saved in another scene, and I have this guy saved out in this scene. And I'll save off like another iteration when I get to a certain step in another iteration. This is really just if you're planning on making alterations to your base mesh that you're rigging, then you would want to make it or changes in that original scene and then update your reference in this rig scene. I'm not planning on making any changes to this model, and if I do, I most likely would just be starting over because this whole process doesn't take too long. So use it if you want, that's what it's there for, but I'm just going to be skipping this step. All right, so that takes care of the pre-section, and now let's bring in the biped fit skeleton. So first thing, I grab this circle deformer, which is like the main joint, or it's like the main controller of this rig. And I just scale it up roughly to where I think, I'm going to have to move the least amount of each joint. Let me turn on X-ray joints. And that's about right. They're mostly where they need to be. And a little bit bigger is good. All right, so I always start with the root and then move my way outward when I'm placing these joints. So I'm going to select my root, switch to my move tool, and then hold down D, which will move these joints independently. So you really do not want to move this root. This is in the center of the circle for a reason. So you generally, unless you're importing mocap data or something, generally you move your limbs stationary, and then you move this if you want to move the entire rig. You don't necessarily grab the hips and then bring them outside of the circle. Usually when you're animating, it depends. But when you're rigging, you really want to keep this guy, as center in the circle as you can. So I'm going to hold down D, bring this down roughly into the center. Let me check my side view. So this probably, hold down D, be brought forward just a little bit. Let me bring this guy while I'm here. I always just try to aim for like about the center, and I try to keep this S curve in there. All right, and then the hip. We'll also be bringing this down to about here. And then one thing that's really important is you want to keep these joints oriented so they're straight in the front view. So when you're looking in the front view and I turn on X-ray joints, this should remain straight. And the reason why is because of the orientation of the knee. So if I come down here into edit and I turn on pull vector, you'll see that the elbow and the knee have these big red flags pointing out, and when you're rigging, you want them to be pointing straight back or straight forward in the case of the knee. If I take this foot joint down here, I take the knee joint, and I start moving this around independent of the other, I'm messing up the orientation of these joints, and they're not straight anymore. Now, if your character is pigeon-toed or his feet point out or something, you probably don't care about this or you want to change this. So I'm just speaking in general about normally you want your character to be in a neutral pose with their feet and hands pointing naturally, like the knee pointing straight out, the elbow pointing straight back. All right, let's turn pull vector off. So how to get around this is just move this as a joint chain and just keep it straight. I guess just try to line this up as best as possible. If your feet are angled outward, you can always rotate this and that will still maintain that straight line. But this looks pretty good. I actually want to move this forward just a hair too. And let's turn this on. So you can kind of see where this is supposed to be. I think this line right here is about where the bend of the knee joint is going to be taking place. So let's kind of try to match that up as best we can. Bring it back just a hair. You do want a natural bend to the knee. That helps tell the rig which way this joint bends. Actually, probably bring this hip back just a little bit, just increase that. And then this foot joint, bring back to try to match up with the heel, or the I guess this, you would call this the heel bone. These two bones right here, which is kind of the pivoting point for the foot. And then match this heel up with back of the heel, just about right. The toes. The feet aren't too important usually in animation, as long as you have this roughly. Usually you're not going to be grabbing things with your toes or focusing in on the feet moving. Usually the way this rig works is it just treats this as a solid block. And you can have this set up and add in. I think you would just add in joints to this joint, probably, and then attach them and then label them with this IK label. But I have not needed to do that. So this is about where the toe should end. Bring this down slightly. Yeah, So just try to match this up. Yeah, so this will be just treating this as a solid, like one giant toe. Alright. This section looks good. Let's do the clavicle and the arm. So I think bring this up and over is usually good. They call this the clavicle, but it really is more controlling this. As far as the way I've been using it, it really controls more of the traps here. So when you bring the shoulder up, or you want to raise the arm above the head, it really ends up aiding that, and like this area will kind of get squeezed together. You either want to rotate this up or bring it up with the transpose. All right, let's bring the shoulder in, and this generally, let me actually bring this down a little bit. I usually put the shoulder so it's a little bit past where the lats meet the shoulder. So you can kind of picture where this would be rotating, where the bones would be under the skin in real life. About here. Probably a little bit lower, but I think you want this to be straight, or parallel with the scapula. Alright, and you can tell this obviously is set up for a T pose, and I have this guy in an A pose. So for something like this, I just rotate this down, and we want to keep that, maintain that the joint orientation similar to how the knee was set up. So that's why we want to be rotating. Let's switch to object. So this way, I'm moving the joint in line. I think this is almost lined up, but I think this is the bending joint, or it might be this one. Let's do this one. But if I turn that pull vector back on, you can see it's expanding it, but it's not changing the orientation. If I did this, it would. So this needs to go up just a hair to like here. And then I'm actually going to rotate this because my arm does have a slight bend in it. I think that should be good. And then this is going to come down to here. And then this also does have a slight bend to it. I try to keep the fingers straight. I think when I modeled this, originally I had a slight bend to all the fingers. But when I was, the first couple times I rigged this, the fist wasn't closing correctly. So you really want to try to line up these joint, or arrange your fingers similar to how Advanced Skeleton has these joints laid out. So relatively straight. The fingers are a little bit more fanned here in the Advanced Skeleton, or the Fit Skeleton. But that's fine. I'm just going to rotate those. So let's just start with the thumb. I think the wrist is good. Actually, probably bring this down a hair, just so it fits a little bit better. So the thumb, let's actually should make this live, and then we'll have snap to center turned on. And this is just like controlling the meat of the thumb. So if you look at the bones, the finger joints have 3 sections, and the thumb kind of does as well, but it reaches back in to the palm, and then it really only has 2 actually going into the digits. that straight. Probably needs to be brought up a little bit. So this is about right. This is that first bending joint, and then this one I'm going to move down to here. And then this is the tip of the thumb. And I usually just put that about halfway. You can take down the size of your joints, like make them larger. It's usually easier to see. But if you scale it down, that's about, you kind of see, that's about where you want it to be. I think this was at 0.1. 0.1's a good size. It really depends on the size of your scene and the size of your model. Alright, let's do this one. I'll bring this guy down here. And this first joint usually starts a little bit more into the palm, similar to this, but the bend of the fingers starts at the knuckle. Let's see. Bring this up a little bit, and then I'll rotate it. I think that's good. Maybe a little bit down. And the same deal with the thumb. You can see where the joint is going to be rotating here. I can actually, probably should. Bring this up a hair and then rotate it down. Doesn't need to be perfect. You're probably gonna have to go in and paint the weights on these fingers just to make sure they deform properly, but I think the closer you can get it to the center of the mass of the fingers, the easier of a time you're gonna have. Bring this up a little bit. So this needs to be rotated down a little bit. Sometimes making the joints span the fingers, you can tell a little bit easier if it's straight or not. I think that's right. And then the pinky. Just trying to match up these knuckles as best I can. think that's about right. This needs to go up a little bit. Looks good. This joint's like controlling the knife edge of the hand, and it's for like cupping. So if you put your hands together and you kind of were trying to scoop up some water in your hands, you would the metacarpals would like kind of bend and form a little bit of a cup, and that's what this joint here is mimicking. So I'm just going to hold down D and try to place it a little bit. I think here's probably good. That's about in the center. Alright, saving. Make sure you save often. I don't think you're in much of a risk when you're placing these joints for mine to crash. But when you're building the skeleton and stuff, you definitely want to save off a new version. Alright. What's next? This is the neck. And I usually place this a little bit higher. It's probably good here. And then this is the head, and you want to, I place this usually around the base, like the corner of the jaw line here. Let's see, this is so the jaw I usually place around, let me actually switch to world because it's going to be a little bit easier to move this. Look around here, I think is where the jawbone really starts to control, the pivot point for the jaws. And down here, this is just going like right at the edge of the chin. Make sure you're moving this along the center line. Make sure you don't, well actually it won't even let you. It won't let you move it along the X. This is not super important. If you're going to just stick with the body rig and not move on to the face setup, then you want to pay attention to this part. And I'm going to set it up as I would if I wasn't going to do the face setup. But all of this will be replaced if you do the face setup. So if you are, you really don't need to worry about that. This just goes to the top of the head. And then the eye. Let me turn this off. H. Turn this on. This goes to the center of the eyeball. Here. And then this just goes to the edge of the eyeball. So, and then if you were just rigging it this way, you would take the eyeball and then take each eyeball and parent it to these joints. And make sure you do it in both angles. My eyeballs are slightly angled outward, I think -2 degrees. But it's just an approximation of where the center is. They're not, if you're doing a more cartoony character and your eyes are perfect spheres, you'll be able to match this up exactly, but eyes usually are not typically perfectly round. There's this bulge in the front, and then they're usually angled outward slightly, so you're just going to have to approximate the center. Alright, I think that is everything for our fit skeleton. Let me save. Body. I think we're good. Let me put this, I think it's good where it is. Maybe bring this forward just a hair. And this maybe down just a little bit, make it the length between these two joints a little bit more even. All right. Yep. Always double check your work. Make sure everything is looking good. Make sure you didn't knock any joints out of place by moving another joint. I think we are good. Let me check my pole vectors one more time. Still looking good. All right. Let me save. And then I'm going to save as version 2 and build this. And that's all there is to it. So if you just want to do the body setup, I guess you do not need to watch the next part of this. All that's left to do really is just paint your weights. Oh, let me skin them. So for the skinning, I usually just do the skin cage. No matter what you do, I mean, I don't think it's going to give you a perfect result, no matter which of these deforming options you choose. If you have a more of a cartoony character and it's in a T-pose, you'll probably get like a near perfect skin with some of these. What's this one? Not the sub wrap. Oh, the skin loops is actually a pretty good one, especially if you have clean loops and it's a simpler mesh. You'll probably get like perfect skinning. But for bodies like this, I usually just do skin cage and then copy the weights over, and then you just have to finesse the weights with some painting, but usually doesn't take more than like an hour or two to get a pretty good result. All right, let's copy this guy over, and then we will, let's run through the adjustments. This gives you a little bit more of an accurate it gives you a little bit more of an accurate transfer of the weights. So let's just select the body and then we'll say copy weights. I'm not worried about the teeth or the eyes or anything because I'm going to take care of that in the face setup. If you are only doing this body setup, then you probably want to select everything that's in your rig and skin it that way. All right, so these weights have been transferred over. Let's see if that's working. Yes, and then I'll delete my skin cage. All right, and then, yeah, all that's left to do is, there's always some issues around the bending joints, is just like go through. Oh, I actually did the forearm pretty good. Needs a little bit of work. But you could go through and you could do the delta mush, which I usually do not do, especially if you're doing a more realistic character, which just like kind of smooths everything out, but you won't be maintaining volume as well. Yeah, so under the arm, the crook of the elbow, the wrist, the knee, and the ankle. Actually, this doesn't look too bad either. But you probably want to do like corrective blend shapes on these. Ooh, yeah, this hip area needs some work. Always does. Especially if you're ever trying to have your character do a split, this never looks right. This always needs a corrective blend shape. All right, let's zero this guy out. Display, pose, reset. All right, so that is going to do it for the body setup. I don't paint the weights until I have everything finished because the face, there's so many things that can go wrong with the face setup. So I'm going to save this out and then save out another iteration and then start on the face setup. But if you guys just are doing the body setup, then this should be good for you. Hopefully you got something out of this. I think the body setup has been pretty standard among all of the different versions of Advanced Skeleton. It's really the face setup that most of the changes have been made, but hopefully this was useful for you. If you have any questions about anything I went over in this video, let me know in the comments below. If you have anything else that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments below as well. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.